Good morning, Life Church. It's a joy to be with you, joy to be opening up the Bible, God's word to you. Now, in the Bible, we find 4 accounts of the life of Jesus. Jesus is the main character. Let's not get that confused. Though Jesus is the main character, we find a number of other supporting characters in his story. So you get some people who you will occasionally see, but you won't really hear from. Others who you will see and you will hear from them. They get like the odd line here and there. But there are some supporting characters who seem to, they're like a recurring feature. So you'll see them and you'll hear from them quite a bit. One of them is a man who was originally called Simon, but renamed Peter by Jesus. Now, guys, over the next 3 weeks, we are going to be spending some time looking at the life of Peter. And this morning, our particular focus, the reason why we're going to be looking at Peter's life, is that hopefully, that's my hope and prayer, we're going to see how Jesus works in and through regular people. So Peter was a regular guy. Now, I appreciate he lived 2,000 years ago, thousands of miles away, but he was still a regular guy. So hopefully this morning, we're going to see how Jesus uses regular people. We're going to do so by looking at 4 episodes in the life of Peter. And actually, it's worth bearing in mind, as we go through those episodes, occasionally you'll hear him referred to as Simon. Simon is Peter, Peter is Simon. Okay, so 4 episodes in the life of Peter. Right, episode 1, Jesus at Peter's job. So Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through to 20 say this. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat, preparing their nets. Without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. Now, Peter is an experienced fisherman. You could say he knew fish like the back of his hand. He likely would have been fishing from a very young age and would have expected to do so into his old age. In fact, it's quite likely that Peter would have learnt fishing from his father and would have expected to pass the fishing business on to his children. Fishing was very much a part of his regular day-to-day. So on what started as a very regular, ordinary day for Peter, he was out fishing. But you know, this day that started off as a very regular, ordinary day at work for Peter did not end as a very regular, ordinary day, because he met somebody called Jesus. We're told Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon, that's Peter, and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. And he said, come, follow me. Come, follow me. You know, the interesting thing is that as we look at this particular passage and the parallel passages in the other accounts of the life of Jesus, friends, we're given no indication that Jesus sort of conducted like an interview process for Peter, right? There's no conversation about, okay, Peter, like what qualifications do you have? Have you got any certificates that you can show me? There was no, Jesus did not give to Peter like a person specification and say, look, have a look at this. If you feel like you meet the majority of the kind of the essential criteria on this list, drop me an email and I'll see whether I can kind of slot you into my team in terms of what we're doing. There's none of that in there at all. But what does Jesus do? Jesus essentially offers him a job. He gives him a job description. 2 things on that job description. Number 1, come, follow me. Number 2, be sent out by me to fish for people. And it slightly boggles our minds, doesn't it? And I think the reason why it boggles our minds is that we are often tempted to think of Jesus like he's some kind of talent scout or some kind of recruiter. As though Jesus has his eyes out there looking for talented, capable, able people. Friends, I want to tell you that is not the Jesus that we find in the Bible. He did not come to earth to look for the best and the brightest. Jesus is no talent scout. Jesus is no recruiter. Jesus is no headhunter. In fact, when I look at my Bible, what do I learn about who Jesus is? Well, one thing that I learn about Jesus is this. The Bible tells me that he created all things and he sustains all things by his powerful word. The Bible tells me that the sun and the moon and the stars, that the rivers, the valleys, the mountains, the lakes, the seas, all of that was made by Jesus, the eternal Son of God. And by implication, I understand that the eternal Son of God made Peter. He made the ground that Peter stood on. He made the air that Peter was breathing in. So it therefore logically follows that if he has made Peter, he is perfectly able to remake, reshape, remodel Peter to be the person he needs to be to fulfill God's purposes. And friends, that applies to each and every person in this room. You know, occasionally at home, I might look into the fridge or look into the cupboard and I think to myself, well, okay, there's stuff here, but I have no idea how I'm going to kind of work with what I've got in terms of like a coherent meal. Maybe sometimes you guys have had that experience as well. You're thinking, okay, there are elements here, but I don't know how this is really going to fit together. Do you know what? Jesus, when he looks out at us, he never has that feeling. He never has that feeling thinking, boy, I'm not entirely sure what I can do with these guys. They've got quite a few, I mean, I can put something together, but it's going to be like average at best. He never has that thought or that feeling. You know, there was a guy back in the Old Testament, a guy called Moses, who was called by God for a particular purpose. And Moses' response was, I'm not particularly confident. I'm not a very good speaker. I don't know if you should be sending me. What does God say back to him? He says, Moses, who made your mouth? Who made your tongue? Me. Friends, I think it's so important for us to have a correct understanding of who Jesus is. Jesus is very much in the business of using regular people like you and me. We so often discount ourselves, don't we? We look to the left, we look to the right, and we think, I'm not quite like that person. Can I encourage us, friends? Let us not look to the left or look to the right, or even look inside of ourselves, but to look out at him. He says, come, follow me. Not, give yourself 6 months, get a bit of training, do this, do that, and then, we heard it with Taddy, didn't we? It wasn't that she kind of thought, let me get my stuff together and then I'm going to come to Jesus. It's no, as I am who I am, I'm going to come to him now. Let us be those who come and follow Jesus. So that's Jesus at Peter's job, episode 2, Jesus at Peter's house. Okay, Mark chapter 1, verses 29 to 31. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Remember, Simon is Peter. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. I have a confession to make. There are particular moments when I'm at home and I think to myself, do you know what? If someone were to sort of just knock on right now and want to, come in and come by, I'm thinking this really would not be the best time because they would not get the best impression of our household at this very particular time. And I'm hearing a few kind of laughs and nods out there. I think many of us have had this experience where sometimes, if we're completely honest with ourselves, life at home can maybe be just a little bit chaotic, a little bit messy, maybe not quite what we would want it to be, or certainly not what we would want other people to see. You know, Peter's home situation on this particular day is a little bit chaotic. It is a little bit messy. Peter, his brother Andrew, their friends James and John, they've been out with Jesus. They've been at the synagogue. Jesus has been doing his preaching and his teaching thing. But a time comes to leave the synagogue. Now, Peter has a sick relative at home. And I know from experience, when you live in a house and there's someone in the house is unwell, and she was very unwell, just to say, it does really affect things in a house, doesn't it? Now, most people, I would expect, at this point, if they were sort of traveling with Peter, maybe James and John, and Jesus would say, do you know what, Peter? I appreciate you've got a situation at home that you need to deal with. You've got a sick family member. You've got responsibilities there. It's been brilliant, like in the synagogue and the stuff that we've been doing. I get that, but you probably need to get back. Be blessed. I'm going to go this way. Just I hope everything is all right for you. I'm going to leave you to it. That's probably what most people would do. We look at the passage and we realize Jesus ain't that guy. There is a chaotic situation at home. There is messiness at home. There is a less than ideal situation at home. What does Jesus do? Jesus says, I'm coming round. Jesus steps right into the midst of Peter's life. He steps right into Peter's home situation. You know, we need to understand something. Jesus did not spend the bulk of his time at the synagogue, at the temple. What was Jesus mainly doing? He was out and about in the midst of regular life with regular people. Most of his ministry or his service, if you look at these 4 accounts of the life of Jesus, most of it happened in the midst of regular, ordinary stuff. So this is not like a random feature. Like this is normal. This is what he does. You know, I feel like I'm confessing a lot about my house, and Jess is probably going to have a word with me afterwards. I try to be behaved, but it's coming out anyway. I hope I'm not alone in this. There are some parts of my house that when it comes to like cleaning and tidying and stuff, don't get the same level of attention as other parts, right? Just bits that you sort of, you forget that they exist. So maybe it's like the bit behind the fridge or the washing machine, or like, there are certain bits where it's like, oh yeah, that does exist, but I kind of don't really think about it. Certain parts that you know, if people are coming around, you're not putting them out and kind of, have a look at that, my friend. There are certain, I'm sure we all have certain cupboards in the house where it's like, oh, no, don't go in there. You don't want to have a look at that. Friends, I want to say to us, Jesus wants to get into every corner and every crevice of our lives. Let us not just think that he is interested in what happens here between the hours of 10:30 and 12 o'clock, or 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening when we've got, encounter, or whatever time we've got prayer pod. He wants to get into every corner and every crevice of our lives. The everyday, ordinary, mundane stuff that we do day in and day out. Friends, tomorrow morning, so I believe that, Jesus is here with me at the moment, helping me, empowering me. Tomorrow morning, I'm probably at this time, I'm likely to be pretending to be Spider-Man with my 3-year-old, right? Jesus is just as interested in that time as he is in this time. Jesus works in the regular lives of regular people. And I want to, if we're not convinced about this, again, let us think about who Jesus is and just reflect on that for a few moments. God has existed eternally as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Eternally. But there came a particular point in history where the Son of God added a human nature to his God nature. Like he entered into the womb of a young lady called Mary. Like he was born. And he started to crawl and then started to learn to walk, and he had elbows and a nose and a forehead and all that stuff. He lived a very ordinary life like you and I. Friends, just reflect on that for a few moments. The eternal Son of God became like one of us. And you know what? Even now we're told that he stands at the right hand of the Father in heaven, still in a body. So he's still got the elbow and the nose and the forehead and the knees and all of that stuff. And when he comes back, he's coming back again in a body. All of that tells us is he is utterly committed to us as human beings and ordinary human life. He's not over there, kind of just chucking in a little bit of advice. No, he's right in the midst of life with us. So I want to encourage us, guys. Welcome Jesus into every room of the house of your life. All of the stuff, your commute to work, your exercise, your cleaning up, all of the stuff, welcome him into every room. Because I tell you what, when Jesus comes into a room, he makes it better. You know, I talked about those parts of the house that you don't really, you don't want to show other people. Jesus says, show me all of that. Okay, episode 2. Episode 3, Jesus is in conversation with Peter. So we're going to turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 13 through to 26. Okay, it says this. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others, Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. And I'm just going to roll on. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him or correct him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Now, friends, that passage is a significant, deep, thoroughly important passage. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not taking like the main focus of the actual passage. I'm taking a slight angle on it. But the reason why we looked at that passage, the reason why we looked at that episode in the life of Peter is that hopefully it reveals something to us about some of the ways that Jesus works in us as regular people. See, one of the primary ways that Jesus forms us or makes us is through both encouragement and correction. I hope you saw that there in the passage. I hope that was stark and very clear to everyone. There was both encouragement and correction. You know, encouragement and correction are kind of like guardrails, right? That sort of keep us on the right path. I think we get it oftentimes when it comes to children or younger people. We recognize that children need lots of encouragement, right? We also recognize that children need lots of correction from time to time. Friends, I want to tell you, whether you are 8 years old or 88 years old, you need both encouragement and correction. You know, when it comes to encouragement, what's happening really? Jesus is identifying something in Peter. He's saying, look, this thing here, Peter, is good. This is really good. This is why it is good. Peter, keep on going with it, right? That's encouragement. We often get more of what we encourage. You know, I've learned a few things in my 39 years of life. If, for example, someone makes you a meal or makes you a cake and you particularly enjoy it, here's what you should do. make sure you go and encourage them, please. Tell them how wonderful it was. Tell them how much it benefited you and blessed you. And if they hear that a few times, this is what's likely to happen. They like to go away and think, okay, do you know what? I should make that for them again. And I've done this loads of times. I'm so well fed off the back of encouragement, right? But all of that to say, we are kind of wired to respond that way to encouragement. Correction. Again, Jesus is identifying something in Peter which is, it's not good, it's slightly off, it's slightly defective. And he says, Peter, no, hit the pause button, my friend. Stop going in that direction. Look, encouragement and correction are very practical ways that Jesus works in and through regular people. Now, Jesus works in a multiplicity of ways. I definitely have the experience where just by his Spirit, he will do something in my heart or do something in my thinking, almost just like that. Absolutely. But I would want to say to us, friends, that probably the primary way that he works in his people to shape his people is in fact through the encouragement and correction of one another. So we encourage and we correct on behalf of Jesus. I think we often underrate or undervalue the power of encouragement and correction. And it's funny, even now as I look out on the room, there are faces here of people who I'm so thankful for. People who over the past 2 years have had times where they've pulled me aside and they've looked me like directly in the eye and they've brought me some encouragement, probably and correction at the same time really. But things that have really shaped me and have stuck with me over the past 2 years. And maybe many of us have had that experience. We can remember very, very specific cases or examples of encouragement or correction that came to us years and years and years and years ago and are still with us now. Friends, we find it even in Peter. So this is years after all of this, and Peter's been helping to lead churches and start churches. We're actually told that there's another leader, a guy called Paul, who had to correct Peter, who had to say to Peter, look, my friend, like your behavior is way out of line. You need to sort it out. If it's good enough for Peter, an apostle of Jesus, it is good enough for each and every one of us. Can I encourage us to just consider how can you lean into both giving and receiving encouragement and correction? And I say that because I recognize in myself, I've been so challenged. I've really dropped off in this area. So for me, this is like a very present, real thing. But ask yourself the question, how can I lean into both giving and receiving encouragement and correction? Episode 4. Jesus sends Peter and his friends. So we're going to look at Matthew chapter 28. Verses 16 through to 20. And in fact, at this point, I'll ask the musicians to come back up. Matthew 28, 16 to 20 says this. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. As we look back through those episodes, we hopefully come to realize that Jesus calls out regular people. Hopefully we come to realize that Jesus steps into life with regular people. Jesus encourages and challenges regular people. But here in this passage, we see that Jesus reveals himself to and sends regular people. What is it that Jesus says to Peter and his friends? Jesus says, all authority in heaven and earth is given to me. That is a weighty statement. But you know what? Jesus is saying, all authority in heaven and earth is given to me. He's only saying something that Peter and his friends have already come to see with their eyes. Because Jesus just as well could have said to them, guys, you have seen what happened when we were at that wedding in that place called Cana, where those big jugs of water became wine at my command. You've seen what happened where we had the few loaves of bread and the fishes, and thousands upon thousands were fed, and there was leftovers as well. You've seen what happened where we encountered that man who was blind, but after meeting me, he was no longer blind, he was seeing. You've seen what happened when we were on the boat and you guys were losing your minds, thinking you were going to die, and you woke me up and I spoke to the storm and immediately all was calm. You have seen what happened when I was arrested. Beaten, mocked, crucified, buried. And right now, you see me right in front of you, alive and kicking. You ordinary, regular people have seen that I am no regular man. That is what you have seen. Jesus says, therefore, based on what you have seen, go and fish for men, women, and children in every corner of the world. Go and tell what you have seen and heard and experienced. Go knowing that the eternal Son of God is with you always. Look, friends, the world does not need more superstars. It really doesn't need more superstars. There is one superstar, and his name is Jesus. The superstar Jesus, his plan, his strategy, his idea for changing this world is by taking very regular, very ordinary people like you and me, working in them and through them. What the world needs is folks like us in whom Jesus lives. And that's something that all of us can get in on. I appreciate that some of us here today, you maybe haven't started that journey of following Jesus. You're not really sure. You're trying to find out who this Jesus is. But he does make an invitation. When he says, come and follow me, that is an invitation for all of us. Nobody is discounted.